Growing up, I was always interested in the mental game. After years of study, I developed the BasketballBrain program. My life is devoted to helping others achieve their greatness. I hope you'll like, subscribe, and if you take a chance with the BasketballBrain program, I promise you your game's going to reach levels that you never thought possible. What's up guys, Dylan here, how's it going? So we're going to talk about Kawhi Leonard. I'm going to go more in depth with Kawhi at some point, but I just wanted to do a short mini version about the psychology of Kawhi so we can maybe understand him a little bit more, and hopefully there's things you'll learn about him that you can incorporate into your life, into your game, and possibly you can also learn a little bit about yourself and see similarities between you and him, especially if you're more of a quiet person, and we'll get into that. When I think of Kawhi, what I think of is the silent warrior in movies, the silent assassin. It's somebody who doesn't really say much, but he's known for having an immense amount of skill. In the movies, he'll be off in the corner in the dark room. You know, there's a bar scene and there's just somebody mysterious in the corner. A fight breaks out. He comes out and whoops everybody's butt because he's uniquely gifted. And what we'll really see about Kawhi is this uniqueness in his personality is also unique in his game. He's a quiet player and he changes the game in ways that aren't brash always. It's not like he has the most spectacular highlights in the world. Okay, this side of that block on James Harden. Really, when you see Kawhi play, what you're seeing is that silent assassin, not doing anything really flashy. And then at the end, you look around and you go, he just destroyed everybody. He just destroyed everybody. So that's what we're dealing with here, this sort of enigma. So what contributed to making him this way? Well, in my study of Kawhi, I have to tell you what I think happened is this is the way he was born. Some people are born with a proclivity for introversion, and this is who Kawhi was from a very young age. Now, we want to say, a lot of people say it was the night of January 18th, 2009. This, if you don't know, when Kawhi was a junior in high school, he got a call after a game that his father had died. His father was shot outside of a car wash and in Compton, I believe, and there was no reason or rhyme to it. It was simply a random shooting. Kawhi said at the time, according to a newspaper article, that I felt like my world stopped. I didn't want to believe it. It didn't feel real to me. And then he had to go out and play a basketball game the very next day. He scored 17 points. And he said, basketball helps me take my mind off things, picking me up every day when I'm feeling down. Basketball is my life. I want to go out there and take my mind off of it. It was real sad. My father was supposed to be at the game. Now, what we're talking about here is how did Kawhi become an introvert? Well, we see that really it reinforced who he already was. Sometimes when something bad happens to you, in the movies, something bad happens to you and you make this major change. You go exactly 180 degrees the opposite way, and that's it. You're a totally new person. But in reality, in real life, sometimes when bad things happen to us, it just makes us more of who we are. It turns us into a bigger version of who we already are. And I think this probably took someone who is introverted and just helped him reestablish the fact that, yes, I'm an introvert. That's who I am. That's I'm not saying this was conscious in his mind, but he knew this is how he handled things. He had to go inside, and then he had to get back to work. When people call me with problems, because I don't just do sports stuff, but if they call me with problems and I'm talking to them, I always tell them start to work again. Get working. If you're going through like a major breakup, you had a death in the family, a bankruptcy, the key is just to keep working. Don't stop working. If you can get out and you can keep moving, there's something in work that helps the soul. It helps healing things. And we know, we basketball players, we athletes, we know that sometimes the best thing you can do when you're going through something is get a ball, go on a basketball court by yourself, and just start shooting. I remember when I was in high school, I went through a bad breakup, and I got into the gym at night, and it was midnight, and I just shot for 3 hours. You know, and I know basketball can become your therapist. That's not a replacement for real therapy if you need it, of course, but it doesn't hurt. That basketball, Michael Jordan said the same thing, that basketball was his therapist after his father died. And so was baseball. Just getting in and working on baseball helped him process out the death of his father. So we see this with Kawhi. This night when his father died, I don't think it changed him. I think it made him more of who he was. I think it made him immune to sort of criticism. It made him immune to the external world. He just went within and he stuck with a very close group of people, which explains probably why his uncle and this little close-knit group have so much sway over him. And I wouldn't call it sway over him. I think he just listens to them. Introverted people typically have a close-knit group of friends, and that close-knit group of friends are very selectively chosen, friends and family, and therefore when they give an opinion, when they give a piece of advice, the introvert tends to listen to them because it's not just like they're listening to everybody. Listen to what the assistant coach at San Diego State said. This is where Kawhi went to college. He said he was a guy you had to go find in recruiting because he wasn't going to pick up his phone. It's kind of funny. He was not easy to get in touch with, not easy to read, but he was genuine with me. So if you continued to work and you called him and you went to see him and text him, he appreciated that. So again, you're seeing this quality, like if you prove your loyalty to him, if you prove your trust to him, he's going to really respect your opinion. In fact, he wasn't that recruited coming up, but then San Diego State was one of the first schools to really go after him. When the bigger name schools started to come, he ended up going with San Diego State because he had that close relationship with them. And another misconception about introverts is they're kind of isolated and don't know what's going on in the outside world. That's not true. Typically, they don't interact with the outside world, but they're very observant as to what's going on in the outside world. In fact, his AAU coach said, Kawhi knows everything that's going on. Once you get him in that front seat of your car and you get him alone, he'll ask you questions he needs to ask you. He's quiet, just watching, just looking at everything. But his teammates and people like to be around him. So introverts can be very fun to be around, of course, if you know them and you're in that little close-knit circle. But don't mistake his quietness, don't mistake his non-statements when the trade was going on, that he doesn't recognize what's going on. He's very self-aware. He's very in tune with the environment. He just doesn't like interacting with it. So that's what was happening, I think, during this whole Spurs trade debacle. You watched an introvert go through a trade process, and that's what introverts do. Not everyone is as vocal as Conor McGregor. Not everybody is as outspoken. And, of course, the media don't know how to handle somebody like him. They have no idea how to handle somebody like him. And, the Spurs didn't know how to handle a true introvert. I don't know how you actually... Personally, I don't know what you do, because an introvert's going to do exactly what Kawhi did. It shouldn't be a mystery. And, it's very hard to deal with an introvert. In fact, one of the signs if you're introverted is people around you say you're very hard to get to know. You're mysterious. You're sort of an enigma that you can't really crack. You try to get close to a person who's introverted and you just can't. That you can't get in. They don't let you. Very few people get into the heart of an introvert. And one more time, let me say it, that's probably why his uncle has so much sway. He's in there and very few people are. I want to shift gears a little bit here because, again, we're going to do a more in-depth study of Kawhi, but I still think this is really kind of cool just to do this little short kind of version of it. The thing I notice about great players, one of the things that's really kind of mysterious to me is how great players, there always seems to be fate involved with their career. For instance, LeBron ends up in Cleveland, right near Akron. Isn't that crazy? Did you ever think about that? MJ ends up in a major market in Chicago and not Portland. I mean, think how different it would be had MJ played in Portland. He might not be as famous. It's entirely possible. And then Kobe ends up in LA and gets away from Charlotte. Could you imagine Kobe as a Bobcat or a Hornet? It just doesn't make sense. Great players tend to end up in these really unique situations. And Kawhi ends up with the Spurs. Now, if you're going to be an introvert in the NBA, what team do you think would be a good fit for you? And I think the Spurs would come to everybody's mind, am I right? And what's really interesting is the Spurs didn't draft him. They actually had to trade for him, and it wasn't easy. They traded George Hill for Kawhi. That sounds like a no-brainer now, but Popovich said this, actually. He said, "This was the toughest decision I had to make in 20 years that I've been head coach. It's not even close. We were scared to death sitting in the room. I think it was the 15th pick, if I remember. And we got to 11, 12, 13. Danny Ferry, our CEO, and I were looking at each other saying, are we really going to do this? George Hill was one of my favorite players. He was important to us, but we needed to get bigger. So in the end, we said we're going to roll the bones and we're going to do it. But I can tell you that at that point, we didn't know that Kawhi was going to be what he is today. That would be an exaggeration. So fate gets Kawhi with the Spurs. Fate ends up getting him to the perfect team for him at that time. Now, of course, we know that's all changed, but it's really interesting to note that when you're a great player, these things tend to work out in your favor in some way. And let me just make another side note here that in the NBA, more and more frequently, guys from smaller schools are dominating the NBA. I mean, just look at the Warriors, Steph, Draymond, Clay. Why is that? Why is that happening more frequently now? I think it has something to do with the exposure to great competition in AAU and so forth. But more importantly, I think being able to see a lot more basketball on YouTube, see different moves, see how good other players really are. You get to see their form. You get to see how they dribble. And every time the game involves, even in a little increment, it's instantly spread around. When I was growing up, the And One mixtape came out, and that kind of expanded the game. Some people say for worse. But the amount of basketball you can watch today compared to the amount of basketball I could watch when I was growing up, it's 30x, 30 times more basketball to watch. I mean, any time when you're going to bed, I'm sure you put on NBA highlights. When you're just hanging out, you've got something going on in the background. You have you have basketball highlights on. So I think that's why you're going to see a lot of guys from smaller schools. They really have a lot of skill because they've been working on their game so much. One more point is when you watch YouTube, you see how much competition's out there, and you realize very quickly if you're going to be good, you better start getting better. You have to start practicing. You can't go into denial about the competition. They're there. It's not a mystery. It's not your imagination. You can go see what other guys are doing. Again, when I was growing up, you just would hear rumors about certain players, and you had no idea what they look like, and you can see your competition immediately. Let me add one more point about fate here. And when Kawhi won the NBA Finals MVP, he won it on Father's Day. And it's ironic because if you remember MJ, who had a similar horrific experience when his father was murdered, he won a championship when he first came back on Father's Day. If you know the image, Jordan grabs the ball, runs to the locker room, and is weeping, holding the ball. So in conclusion, when you study Kawhi, he can be a little bit frustrating, but I think in the end, he's refreshing. He's refreshing because in a world of extroverts, we have this introvert who's succeeding. He's not brash about his brand. He's not out there throwing it in your face. He's not all over Instagram. He's going his own way and he's doing his own thing. And he is that silent assassin, that silent warrior who's going to, at the precise moment, defeat you. He can do it in a multitude of different ways. He can do it on offense. He can do it on defense. Remember the block on Harden. And he does it without a whole lot of jubilation. It's kind of stoic. It's kind of, I always think of the samurai. Again, I come back to this. Fighting, kills everybody, and then with no emotion, wipes the blood off his sword and puts it back in the scabbard, and that's it. It's just a day's work. So it's not to say Kawhi's a complete emotional robot, but for the most part, that's his trend. There are times where he'll show emotion, of course. He has some funny commercials, and then when he wins, he can celebrate. But even then, you can see it's sort of muted compared to where an extrovert will go with the same sort of victory. Anyways, we can get deeper and deeper into Kawhi, and it'll be more fun to see what happens when he's the man on the team, when he's the alpha male on a not-so-good team in Toronto. Let's see what he does. Anyways, I hope you guys like and enjoy this. I want to do more of these little quick, well, sort of quick analyses of the psychology of certain players. Please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. More coming soon. Kobe coming soon. Have to fix some copyright issues with that. Hopefully this one won't get nabbed by YouTube. All right, guys. Thanks. Bye.